Why does Estelle Bright from Trails in the Sky absolutely shit all over most female protagonists and generally a lot of other media? This is a question that has been weighing heavily in my mind because it's clearly not just her tomboyish charm as a lot of AAA developers might think it would be. It's not necessarily the fact that she plays with bugs or she likes to roughhouse and fight with a giant stick. I think at its core what makes her the perfect heroine is her humanity, first and foremost. Now, what do I mean by humanity? I'm talking about an intrinsic characteristic that every person has within them, and that is flaws. Estelle is not a perfect person. She is, for all intents and purposes, a very flawed character while also being incredibly endearing. One such flaw is the fact that Estelle is not the brightest individual in the entire cast of Trails. The very first prologue of Trails in the Sky makes this very apparent with how Estelle takes a very lackadaisical and unmotivated approach to her actual in-classroom teaching sessions with Shahrazad, her mentor, whereas her duotagonist slash love interest Joshua shows a high aptitude for thinking and problem solving, and he essentially acts as kind of her brain for a big portion of the first game as she is developing those skills. Estelle often needs things to be repeated for her and in general has to be walked through detective work by more experienced characters. But from a storytelling standpoint, this is not a bad thing. This is actually amazing because it gives her a relatable energy, a feeling of imperfection that makes her feel like somebody you could know in the real world, somebody you can actually talk to. And this balances out her more positive traits like her great instincts and her genuinely sweet and kind heart, her strong degree of empathy and emotional understanding of other people. Another thing to add to this list is also her seemingly short temper slash tendency to act rashly in some situations. Now, this is both a strength and a weakness because there are certain instances where this sort of becomes Estelle's mark of heroism, where she's very quick to stand up to injustice and stand up to people who are acting like fucking assholes. And while this can get her in trouble sometimes, in the golden moments, it really makes her shine and really makes her feel like somebody who understands her role as a hero, as she essentially is the voice of justice in many scenes, in many scenarios throughout the Trails in the Sky games. In the broader context of female protagonists, not just in video games, but also in things like movies and comics, a big problem they have is that they essentially are trying to really overcompensate for the fact that they have a female protagonist by making her as badass and as uncompromising as possible. The female protagonists in these stories are overtuned to an extreme degree. Because rather than trying to create an actual person, somebody that the audience can look at and relate to as far as their interests, their sense of identity, their justice, and even in terms of their flaws and the things that hold them back from being a perfect individual, the writers create a character that can overcome any situation seemingly on their own, who doesn't need the help of others to solve situations and overcome obstacles, or is just straight up overbearing with how the character exacts their justice. And it just feels like the writers really want you to like the character without having to do any work to actually craft them into somebody that the audience can connect with on a human level. Back to Estelle, remember earlier in the video how I mentioned she's a bit of a tomboy. She likes to roughhouse and do all kinds of stuff. Well, a big key component of crafting a human character is also having them display hobbies and interests and likes and dislikes like any other normal person would be. They're not just an unstoppable paragon. They have things they like to do, like Estelle loves to fish. She used to collect bugs as a kid. She's a very outdoorsy, rough riding kind of individual. However, those characteristics do not take away from the fact that Estelle is still a woman and still has experiences and thoughts that a woman would have. Like, for example, her dynamic with her protagonist Joshua. Joshua is essentially Estelle's love interest, and throughout the entire first Trails in the Sky game, she is essentially sort of pseudo unaware of this aspect of how she feels. She hasn't really fully come to terms with how she actually feels about him. So there's a big sort of side plot about her sort of coming to that realization. There are other characters that comment on Estelle's appearance, either referring to her as being cute or commenting on whether or not they are interested in her. In the second Sky game, Trails in the Sky second chapter, Estelle starts to wear a skirt, and because she's not used to wearing a skirt, she does things like bend over in compromising situations, and her mentor Shahrazad has to like give her a little nudge and let her know, wait, you're wearing a skirt now, you gotta stop doing that. It's all of those little moments that make her so fucking endearing. It's not necessarily the fact that towards the end of second chapter, they essentially slay somebody who becomes like almost a fucking demigod. It's the little moments, the bits of humanity, her fragility, and her inability to necessarily do everything on her own. In fact, that is a core theme of Trails in the Sky, is that you can't do everything alone, nor should you want to. A female protagonist does not need to become a man or be an unstoppable war machine to be engaging, to be lovable. And that's something I feel like a lot of newer properties that have a female protagonist forget about. And by doing that, they also miss out on the growth that characters can experience, the feeling of becoming stronger, becoming better, of a character essentially growing up before your eyes. As we see with Estelle, she becomes a lot stronger, more skilled at her occupation. As the story goes on and we hit second chapter, she doesn't need characters like Joshua and Shahrazad to always be there to help her do deductive reasoning. She can start doing a lot of that stuff on her own. She's able to fight more on par with more experienced enemies and opponents, and she's able to use her empathy and her life experience up to that point to reach and be the warmth for other characters who need her more than anything else. And that's why Estelle is the motherfucking GOAT. Put some respect on her name. Now, to close off this video, I also want to say, like, female protagonists are very important. I think that they add a completely new dynamic to storytelling and to just the general media landscape. I think we have a lot more interesting stories when we have more stories with female protagonists. But I also think it's extremely important that people try their best to get it right and don't oversaturate the market with bad attempts at characters if they don't plan to learn from those attempts. But that's neither here nor there. If you really like this video, give me a like, comment, subscribe. It really helps the channel, and I hope that you return to see what else I have. Thank you for watching. Until next time.